point did this particular subject matter seem to you like something that required a different space and its own kind of project?
I mean, I think that, so that there are two touchstone documentary series of this project. One is Dream Hampton Surviving R. Kelly, and the other is O.J. Simpson's, the other is Ezra Edelman's O.J. Simpson Made in America. And so I don't think I even understand this format to be a thing until I saw specifically O.J. Simpson Made in America. I think that opened up a lot of our eyes as to like, how can you, I think before that, everything was a feature or a half hour or an hour. But I think that showed like, no, sometimes you need several hours. Like, I think, before that, somebody's like, there's a new O.J. Simpson doc coming out. Do you want to see it? It's 7.5 hours long. And I think most of us are like, no, like, why would I want to see a 7.5 hour O.J. doc? No matter what I think about him. And then you sit down, and within about 10 minutes, I was like, and I think a lot of us were like, oh, I get what's happening here. And there's a moment in that doc that's shortly in the first episode where Ezra has earned our trust enough to show OJ breaking tackles in football and have us go, wow, he was really good at football, even though we know that this is not just about football. And so I think that doc specifically, before I ever thought I would be given the chance to do this, was something I was like, that's how you have to tell complicated stories, bigger stories.
Right. So in this particular case, what's notable in that respect is that you do have a lot of people kind of revisiting what they like about Cosby's early work and so forth. But you also have, by and large, a lot of people who are willing to get, at least as far as we can tell, pretty candid about the complexity of that relationship, setting aside the survivor element for a second.
Mm-hmm,
One thing that I noticed you say early on is that there were people who didn't want to be a part of this project. So clarify a little bit about who didn't want to talk about this?
I mean, I'm always very clear that I won't say their names because I think that that's for them to say. And I think some of them actually in some way contributed by the way they said no. I had a long conversation with the people where at the end it was no. So, and none of that information necessarily went in the doc, but it helped me understand what was at stake here and why and how complicated this conversation was. And it was also one of the first times I was really like, oh, if I made a mistake by even doing this, by trying to do this, like if these people, because at that point, Bill Cosby was in prison and it felt like the Bill Cosby story was really over. Like he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison or he was going to get out a very old man. He wasn't doing any of the rehab work, so he wasn't going to get out early. But this was before we knew that it was just going to happen on some random day. It felt like even with him in prison, people are still, especially Black people, there's a sense of like, I don't want to divide my audience because some Black people are on one side of it and some Black people are on the other side of it. And even if I've spoken about this, even if I've spoken out about this already, why would I go into this again? I think that was really the takeaway I got. And I understood it once I talked to people. But it was just, yes, it was frustrating from a filmmaker standpoint, but I accepted those no's and would honor those people by not sharing who they were exactly.
Were there moments for the people you did get on camera that surprised you? Like, whoa, I didn't expect this person to have that kind of reaction to this situation.
So many moments are about like capturing that lightning in the bottle where you're like, oh my God, this is a really I didn't think of it in this way. Like I asked everybody who was Bill Cosby now very early in their interviews. And you see all that sort of like hesitation and deep breath. And Renee Graham said he was a rapist who had a TV show once. Mm-hmm. And that kind of direct, like sort of look into him was just like shocking, even though I was there to talk about both of those things, the career and the what I believe are the assaults and sexual and rapes. But that kind of direct attack on it was like, and Renee Graham has a lot of that in there. So I think that there's like when people, even what we were there to talk about, when we were like, when people felt like they could be that bracing and honest, those were always surprising moments. And then I think, everybody knows what we're there to do. We're going to talk about his whole career. We're going to talk about the allegations. And then you sort of go, okay, now we're going to watch a scene from the Cosby Show, the Ray Charles lip sync, Nighttime is the Right Time. And you can see people, even though they know the frame of all of this, go back to who they were when they saw that and recognize it for the great piece of performance that it was. And it's bigger than a funny scene from a sitcom because it is highlighting Black excellence and Black family.
Right.
And if you're Black and you saw that as when it first aired or later in reruns when you were a little kid, it's one of those moments where you go, you just can't take all that away because it's too embedded into your cultural DNA. Mm-hmm. And so to see people, even though they knew we were talking about the painful things, to sort of to enjoy those moments was really powerful and surprising.
One thing that I find really striking is that, of course, this project deals very specifically with the Black community trying to reconcile different sides of the Cosby legacy. And there are only a handful of people who aren't Black in the film speaking to that issue in different kinds of ways. But I've been talking to people who've seen this thing, seen all four parts to it, and have had very complex reactions to it who are not Black. You know, someone was like, he was my child hero in the 60s.
Yeah.
You know, seeing that timeline was just so horrifying. And so I guess what I'm curious about is, you know, to what extent do you see that audience reaction as part of what you were trying to accomplish here? And, you know, did you talk at all about having more white faces or, you know, not? I don't want to sound, you know, crude, but I assume you know what I mean here.
I mean, here's the thing. It's sort of a self-selecting audience at some point. It's the people who showed up, you know? So I think Black people overall are more invested in this conversation than white people are. Just I'm talking about and also invested in showing up. White people may have complicated opinions about it, but they don't feel the same pull of race and culture that Black people do. So I think that, like, certainly, I mean, just overall, if you stack the no's next to the yeses, the no's are way taller than the yeses. And I certainly reached out to the people who I thought were appropriate for it. And, you know, there were white people who said no, there were Black people who said no, you know, there's Asian people who said no, you know, like, so there's a wide variety of no's, but I think that, like, at its core, this story is a Black story because Bill Cosby, the way we frame Bill Cosby's career is as the first Black performer to do X, Y, and Z. So he's the first Black performer to be a co-lead in a series. He's the first Black performer to win 3 Emmys in a row for a leading role. He's the first. He has the biggest hit sitcom of its day, and maybe, I don't know if of all time, but it's one of the biggest hit sitcoms of all time. And all these firsts and how important it was, specifically at that point in American history. We're talking about in the 80s, Black people were getting our ass kicked on the news every night on the news, and then at 8 o'clock, this Black family would come on and just enjoy their wonderful lives, and how important that was. So it's like the nuance of that is Black. Now, also, I'm Black, as you are aware, because you're familiar with my work. Yeah. So I'm going to tell it through the way that I see it. I think if other filmmakers did it, if a white filmmaker did it, it would be different. But I certainly understand. He was, as we say in the doc, he was America's dad, not Black America's dad, America's dad. And people who worked on this who were around my age or older, who were not Black, who had the same sort of connection, but then they also don't notice the Ebony magazine that I noticed that we talk about. Mm-hmm. They don't notice the Black art on the wall the same way I notice it. And to me, that's key in understanding the Cosby Show, the way in which it highlighted Black excellence and the way that Bill Cosby wanted to highlight Black excellence. They don't know the names of all the Black colleges that he's wearing on his sweatshirts. They don't know. I know those names. I
wanted to ask you about Hannibal Buress because you don't have to say he didn't want to be on camera. I can kind of put 2 and 2 together there. But I always find it interesting when people who are in the comedy space have some broader cultural impact and then sort of not defend themselves, but sort of pull back and say, you know, I'm just trying to be funny, whether it's, you know, John Oliver, Jon Stewart, any of those folks, or somebody like this. And I guess what I'm curious about is, what do you think about the impact Hannibal had there and this sense of perhaps discomfort in comedy being able to have that kind of impact? Because it is historic what he did, as you show in the doc.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, Hannibal's impact, I think, was one of the big features of Hannibal's impact is that nobody saw it coming. Like, many comics could have done that joke or some version of that joke. I could have done it, and you maybe would have seen it coming because I'm a comic who talks about race and racism and it criticizes whatever. But the fact is that it was a whole perfect storm of things. Hannibal doesn't tell jokes like that. He doesn't tell jokes that are about, like, big cultural issues. He's not a guy who tells racism jokes that are hard hitting like that. He talks about some of these things, but it's not his act. His work since then has not been focused on that. He's not you would never call Hannibal a social justice warrior. You know, you would never call him a snowflake. He's not that guy. And so I think a part of its impact is because nobody saw it coming. And that's often how big cultural movement starts. It's like, it doesn't mean it's not something that somebody planned. It's just something somebody stepped into. Now, often that person wanted to step into it, but they didn't know how big it was going to get, or or it happens to them and then they realize, oh, I have to be a bigger part of this because I've stepped into this. Like I think about like the kids at the high school in Florida, the high school shooter, that those kids were like, I didn't mean to be a part of this, but now I need to take this on. This is part of my life and part of my life's work now. And we're used to people just sort of feeling like they have to do it. We're used to people feeling like, well, it's my responsibility. Hannibal didn't feel that way. Hannibal was like, I think he recognized it was a perfect storm and he wanted to navigate through the storm and get back to living his life the way he wanted to live his life. I don't think he had any issue with people using it to break the story, but you have it now. Go do what you want to with it. I'm not trying to be that comedian. That's not what I'm interested in. I really respect him because he could have gotten pulled into that and it wouldn't have worked because it's not where he wants to be. So I respect him for really being clear on that with everybody. It's not like he only talked to certain outlets about it or only wanted to talk to, he was like, I will answer a couple questions. And at a certain point, he was like, I don't want to answer these questions anymore. I want to talk about Angry Birds too, which I'm in. Right. which is totally, I get it. And I don't think this discussion necessarily, it's like, you have to talk about that part of the Cosby story, but I don't think that it's necessarily like Hannibal has been clear, like you can have it, but it's not really mine.
I'm curious if you ever encountered Cosby and if you ever thought about actually getting his voice into this piece at all.
I saw Cosby perform live once, I think 2013, and sometime before then, a few years before then. But it didn't, as a person who was at a show, not as a person who was a comedian, didn't engage with him in any way. One of the times in 2013 was at South by Southwest, where he performed in a backyard, as happens at South by Southwest, and he was there to promote his new Instagram account, which seems like so like, and I took a picture and posted it, not with him, but a picture of him on stage, because I was so excited to see Bill Cosby and with 200 people, and weirdly, and he killed, and it was like. And I posted on Facebook, so excited. And some people were like, yay, good for you. I'm jealous. And then some people were like, why would you post a picture of this man with all these stories out here of the things he did to women? And I was like, and I had heard those stories, but like a lot of people, and I'm complicit in this, I just hadn't like forced them to live in my brain together. And so, and it was later that Hannibal did his joke. Even in that moment, I didn't then take up the cause. I just was like, I sort of felt like, oops. But I didn't take up the cause and start to, and I didn't start writing my version of the Hannibal Buress joke. I just sort of was like, oh, I don't. And I think that's for a lot of people, and Black people specifically, it just becomes easier to avoid it because it's such a divisive and can be such a toxic conversation.
Which is so crazy because it's like 2013 or whatever, South by, like that feels like yesterday in the broader cultural timeline. I mean. It, not that long ago, I remember watching the last Netflix special where he's sitting in the chair and doing the jokes with his hand. I mean, it's just like such a
that was his big comeback, and I think that was, he went on to a comedy tour. And I mean, you think about like South by 2013 doesn't seem that long ago. Oh, Barack Obama was president. Like it's like there was no COVID. So in some sense, it seems like 100 years ago.
The most striking moment for me, and it's an archival bit, but it's contextualized by everything leading up to it. It's when you show Jerry Seinfeld on Colbert, and Colbert says he can't listen to the albums anymore. And Jerry Seinfeld looks like he's never even considered this before. Like he's just speechless. And when I think about that, it's part of a microcosm of this bigger sort of cultural reckoning that we're dealing with, where it's like, do we continue to keep these things as a part of culture with an asterisk, or do we just kind of take them off the table? I mean, with Cosby, it feels like he's really been taken off the table. Like you cannot find the Cosby Show very easily anymore. And I wonder how you feel about that kind of response to this whole situation.
Well, and I think when we talk about that, I think we also have to remember the context. The Cosby Show went off the air in 1992, which is now 30 years ago, I think, if I do the math. Yeah. Most sitcoms from 30 years ago are not, even the hit ones aren't readily available. Like you can't just turn on the TV and find them. So I think we have to start there. That I think that like when I was a kid, if I turned on the TV, I could find an episode of I Love Lucy. Like I just could, even along the 4 channels we had, it was going to be somewhere. It's not like that anymore. Even though they just did the Lucy and Desi, all the Lucy and Desi stuff is coming out. You have to go seek out the show. And also the Cosby Show is airing on reruns on at least one channel that I know of, one of the black channels. But it just wouldn't be, I think we have to sort of not forget, it wouldn't be around anyway the same way it was. But it's not gone, so you can find it if you want to, just like I can go find I Love Lucy. So I think the thing about that I understand from Seinfeld's side of things is that we all take in art and we separate the art from the artist all day long, every day. Especially music is a big area for that. There's some classic rock stars who we sometimes celebrate their bad behavior, or sometimes we just sort of put it off to the side. And then we go, I don't care. I still like this person, or I still like this music.
Yeah.
It means that much to me. So we do that all the time. And then on top of that, we all go home at night and take in content that we wouldn't share with our coworkers. And it doesn't have to be illegal. It's just like stuff that you're like embarrassed by. So I think we're doing that all the time, where we're sort of like recognizing that I have a thing I like that other people may not like. I think the problem is that with Cosby specifically, some people, and this has happened true with R. Kelly, want to yell at the people who don't want to take the content anymore, or want to or attack the people who don't want to take the content. You want to act like, I think that conversation between Colbert and Seinfeld is actually probably the way it should go down. Really? What? Huh? Well, let's talk about it. Like, that's probably the format in which it should go down. Maybe not on television all the time, but like, Jerry didn't start yelling at Colbert. He didn't start going like, what? He's the greatest comedian. He was just like, oh, I've never thought of this. And it felt like, let's talk. And that's why we use it right there. Like, yeah, let's talk about this. So I think that like people keep asking me, am I going to watch more Cosby things after this? I mean, I've watched a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, so I feel like I have a certain level, but I actually found myself enjoying stuff. And that's why we use some of the clips in the show, in the clip of The Nighttime is the Right Time, because to me, that's the classic #1 Cosby clip of all time. But I have kids. At some point, they might stumble across a Cosby thing, or at some point I might find a reason to go, oh, you like that Ray Charles song? Let me show you something. But attached to that is the bigger conversation that I will handle in an age appropriate way.
What kind of challenges did you encounter in terms of getting the footage that you needed here? I mean, in terms of rights and just getting people on the same page with the project you were doing?
I mean, luckily, this project in many ways falls under fair use laws. We are commenting on the material. There are times where we did have to get the rights to songs and things that if that's in there, it's either fair use or we actually sought out the rights. So, it definitely exists, and it's sort of like we are allowed to comment on things that are in the public that have news value. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that we are sort of like, we are using our First Amendment rights in that sense. So, but it was a challenge of like, sometimes you can't find the highest res version of something because you're using it as fair use. So you can't like go ask the people who own it, hey, can we have a higher res version of this? But can we have the master? And that's something we accepted. And I'm like, people are used to seeing this stuff literally on YouTube where the footage looks horrible, but they still enjoy it. And also with COVID, we're all used to taking in all sorts of much more lo-fi content than we used to. So I was never worried about that.
Well, I guess the bigger picture in all this is that by using so much footage, you're able to recontextualize it in a way that allows us to encounter the Cosby Show and the early comedy routines and everything, but within this narrative. So it allows you to see both things, to see the talent, to see the problems. Now that it's done, there are still these open-ended areas. One, that this guy's out of prison. Two, that there's still survivors who haven't come forward. What do you think is the next chapter in all this?
I don't know. I mean, he is apparently going to release a statement about the project tomorrow, or his camp is going to release a statement about the project. So this, to me, it feels like until all 4 of these episodes are out in the world, I don't know what the next step is. But I hope that the next step is not really about Bill Cosby, but about how all of us who sort of want to have this nuanced, productive conversation, or committed to a productive conversation, understand that the film wants to highlight the fact that we currently live in a world that if specifically a woman is sexually assaulted, but all people, that they don't know where to go for support and justice. They don't know where to go for healing. And it's not like about where you can go to the hospital. Many women who've been survived sexual assault will tell you how the hospital did not do right by them. Many women in the doc tell you about how I told a cop, but he told me not to tell anybody, or the police will not respond in a way that is supportive. They will respond in a way that, like Lily Bernard says, blaming and shaming. The general population will blame and shame you. They'll think you're trying to take down a powerful man because you're jealous, or you're whatever. All these ways in which we take down the survivors. So to me, it's about like, whether you believe Bill Cosby did this stuff or not, shouldn't we create a society that is more responsive and more supportive and safer for survivors of sexual assault and rape? And on top of that, shouldn't we look at all systems from sex education in school all the way up through the highest levels of power and go, how do we create a structure that if somebody feels like they see something inappropriate, they have a place to go, even if it didn't happen to them, to report on that and that the system would be like, we are prioritizing investigating this issue over the success or the name or the power of this organization. So it should be more important to have somebody not get assaulted or raped than it is to have a hit TV show.
Amazing. Well, let me ask you this. I don't know what you expect from this statement tomorrow, but if Cosby were to actually watch what you've made here, what sort of an impact would you want it to have on him?
I mean, I think the thing is, and I think a lot of people who are Cosby defenders would actually enjoy big stretches of it, because I think this is one of the only ways you're going to hear the good parts of his legacy told is through this. But I think also he would then not enjoy other big stretches of it, because it's dealing with people who are telling their story of what their time with him was, and they're talking about sexual assault and rape and him being the person who did it. So I don't know how, I can't imagine O.J. Simpson watching Made in America. I would imagine somebody might have to show him pieces of it. But I think the more people I'm concerned with are the people who think they know what this doc is but haven't seen it yet. And I just hope they press play. But I've always understood that the people who hate this the most are the ones who are never going to watch it. And maybe some of the loudest voices will be ones who never watch it.
If he said he was willing to speak to you, would you sit down with him?
No, I don't think there's any. I don't know that there's any point to that. He's been very clear about how he feels about all this stuff. I think that, like, if there was some indicator that he had come to some new understanding or he was going to admit something that he hadn't admitted before, I think there's reason to hear that. But I don't know that I'm even the person that he needs to tell that to. I think there's many more qualified, invested people who would need to hear that than me.
So let me ask you this: now that you've made this piece, I'm curious to know what you when you look back on your trajectory, I mean, your career has taken a lot of fascinating different kinds of forms. What do you wish you kind of knew going into this about the potential to evolve as a storyteller?
I mean, I did one an hour-long doc about Chris Rock's Bring the Pain. that was a total passion project, labor of love, and you really got to sit down with Chris and talk about his life and career in a way that I wasn't able to do with when he was even the executive producer of my show, Totally Biased. So if anything, I wish I'd had more attempts at directing before this. That's all. Like the things I recognized I wasn't able to do well is because, Ezra Edelman did a lot of incredible docs before he got to that epic statement of O.J. Simpson Made in America. And so I wish, but my career has never been aimed the way you would think it would go, so I'm a stand-up comic who has a show on CNN. I'm the only one currently, the only stand-up comic with a show on, so my career has always taken me to spaces that stand-up comics don't generally hang out at a lot. So this is just another version of that. The
term diversity gets bandied around so much, and some of the conversations that we've been having with people as they come through our virtual Sundance studio that diversity seems to be heading in this positive direction. There's more women of color behind the camera and so forth. In terms of what you see being kind of within all of this, but also commenting on it, just how much progress do you think has been made in the years since you got into all this? I
mean, just like with Bill Cosby, we over-indexed on how Black people were doing based on one Black man's runaway success. I think we still do that anytime you see a Black face in an area where Black faces, or a Black woman's face in areas where Black women's faces have not been. You sort of almost count those as 10 Black women. You don't count it as like one. And you also don't understand that when that Black woman leaves that job may not go to another Black woman for a long time. As we found out with a Black president, a lot of people thought, oh, we're going to have a Black president, then a Latino president, and then a woman president. And now we've had 2 white men presidents after Barack Obama. So I think that's the issue. And I think really until specifically Black folks can sort of go, I want to start a studio from nothing and build that studio into the biggest studio into one of the biggest studios in all of Hollywood. And they have all the access to the things that a white person would have in that situation. Until that can happen for Black women, for Indigenous people of all genders, for Latino and Latina people, for the AAPI community, so we can all sort of go, today I want to start a studio, and the powers that be go, that's a good idea because you have a good plan and you have good content. Here's your starting a studio. Until we have the ability to go forward like that, we're sort of nibbling around the edges. And I think that I'm super happy whenever I see the faces of people who are not white men in positions of power. But I'm also aware that like a lot of times those people have come up through the white industry. And so they're not necessarily always the most revolutionary people, it's just so, and it doesn't mean they're not good people, but I think that like, and there's a lot of good people. I mean, Shonda Rhimes, Ava DuVernay, Chandler Dugay, there's all these people all these Black women I see doing good work, but even Oprah did it the way you would expect. Nobody goes talk show host to mogul. That was not a thing that happened back then. Now everybody becomes a talk show host so they can become a mogul. They think that's the path, but really it's about the individual. So until there is more accessibility to power not for people of color or not for Black people of color once we get to the top, but access to it when we're at the bottom looking at the top, we're sort of just nibbling around the edges. And my job, I feel like one of my jobs is to pull more people through this door. So like Geraldine Porras, who's a Latina woman who's a co-EP on this, started as a field producer on United Shades, which is like the lowest level producer on a docuseries. And I actively have like pulled her with me because she's great. And also because I was like, I don't know if that happens if I'm not thinking about you. And the weird part about this is Bill Cosby did the same sorts of things with women as I believe him to be assaulting and raping people. There are many Black people and Black women who go, he gave me my first job and I wouldn't be in this powerful position I am now without that. So it's like, it's a minefield of trying to sort through this.
Well, I hope you start your studio too then.
I hope I'm allowed to keep working in show business after this. That's my hope.
Well, I'll be looking for that statement. I'm so fascinated to see how the life of this thing continues to evolve. Congrats on the project. Like I said, it's just so remarkable, and I hope that we get to talk about it more. Keep up the good work. I'll be following.
Thank you. I appreciate you.